And if I could just live my whole life sketchnote style, I think I'd be very happy. Hello everyone. I am here with another journal that looks just like the others that I have already shared. And this has been an ongoing series with this size sketchbook. This is a Moleskine art sketchbook. And I don't need to count them the same way anymore because that year that started this series is long gone. But I continued in this doing Illustrate Your Week, which is a free weekly set of prompts for illustrated journaling. And because I do portraits, I include portraits and journaling and journal notes and work the prompts in. So that gives me just a way to fill space. So I thought I would share this one and just go through it quickly. This does represent some continuity and some change, some evolution, and that's pretty much to be expected when you keep a sketchbook and when you keep a journal day by day and week by week and month by month and year by year. You can expect things to grow and evolve, some things you come back to, some things you use again and again and again and again, some things you try and you experiment and then you winnow. Some of those things you keep and some of those things you get rid of, and it all becomes part of your voice in your sketchbook and in your illustrated journal, which is super important to me. It's really my journal. It's my story. It's my record, my days, and I enjoy the process of keeping this record. So I'm going to go through it. Obviously, it's a journal. There are things that not everybody really needs to read every single word that I've written, but there is a lot of stuff here. And this one takes place in the final week of 2020. Bye-bye 2020. And then the rest of this is the first part of 2021. I keep pages in between, and I did that a lot in this one because I started seeing that there was a lot of lift. The pages get compressed and smooshed together, and the weight of them as I work on them. And there's a lot of lift. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter. It really is just an artifact of this journaling process. But as I experimented more and more with different colors of ink, some of which is waterproof and most of which is not, and then things like colored pencil, I started slipping the pages in. So I'll just pull them out as I go through. So this was the end of 2020, and I didn't fully color this in, but this model from Sketchy, which is now the Museum by Sketchy, has the greatest pantsuit on. It is so cool. So just a gist of that. And I did that while drawing with friends on, I think, New Year's Eve. Yeah, New Year's Eve. So lots of portraits, quotes. This fulfilled a prompt. I think it was Sign from Illustrate Your Week. This was a prompt. Things in boxes and grids and panels have always been true to how I work. It's very much a part of my aesthetic. And the self-portraits, they can be big, they can be small, they can be full size or cropped or whatever. It is a weekly thing that I do. So you'll see these kinds of things repeated. The grids, though, really morph in this journal. Some pages, I drew this and intended to ink it as a time lapse and just never got back to it. So I still really I like the drawing, I like the portrait. This is something I do at the end of a year or the start of a new year. I look back at the year in terms of my creative life. It's part of what I do for the podcast, and just go through and think about all the different things that I did, some of the numbers and stats, how many of this I did or how many of that, what kinds of things I was really focusing on. It's always a big project. It takes me a little while to really sort it out, and then I lay it out Sketchnote style. And if I could just live my whole life Sketchnote style, I think I'd be very happy. Really, I think my illustrated journal is really trying to really get to more ease with sketchnoting, but I just can't quite get away from the portraits. So lots of portraits. I think I'll slide these underneath. Lots of portraits, lots of circles. This again is just filling space and using lots of different colors of ink. This is a tracking line from that week, a quote, just little things get worked in. And I'm okay when there is space, and I'm okay when I fill the space in, and it just changes week to week. I don't have any rules or expectations. I don't have rules about the format. Just each week I do whatever feels right and whatever makes sense. Colored pencil here. I was really hoping colored pencil might be a solution for me to get more color in, but I really like to get it really dark and burnished, and it's a very time-consuming thing. These ink swatches, I still just love this stack of them. I love seeing them together. I love using all different colors of ink, and I used a lot of colored ink in this journal, and this was a new pen, and I was having trouble with it, and I ultimately made a video about what to do, but I was very disappointed. This was a really good book I read this year. It was incredibly powerful, and it was very thought-provoking. A lot of space here in this opening set. This was for the pantry art project. I don't draw food or bottles, although I have this obsession with the idea of labels, drawing labels. Other people do labels beautifully. And now, all these months later, I kind of like seeing this here. So, quote and a portrait. Again, lots of grid mentality, lots of graphic novel and cartoon style mentality. And then just different things get worked in, and some of these are in response to different prompts. Some testing, notes and quotes and portraits, self-portrait. Again, self-portrait. And I try to label these. Self-portrait week number 30 for year 50 is what this one is. I like this size. It does give me a lot of space for full-size portraits. I'm now working in an even bigger journal, and it's interesting now to look back and see this because this is a good-sized portrait, but then I can't do a whole lot around it, although I left all this space. But now I can do a portrait this size and still fill my weekend around it. As you can see, this whole format continues. Lots of different inks and lots of little boxes. This was a rating system for the week. Circles. Still loving these ink colors. I've been in this turquoise and ultimately purple mode for quite a while now. And then lots of black and white still. This is really central to how I love to work. And now that I see this, I really love this two-tone effect here. Very different in what it looks like filled in versus hatched in, but I actually like how it works together. I like this portrait. I drew a lot more men this year than ever before. These circles are just mindful. I can sort of tell what was going on with me sometimes just by seeing how much of this fills my pages. Obviously important times in our country, and then self-portrait and portrait. And this one, I never did fill it all in or finish inking it, but I really enjoyed working on her. And I enjoyed doing this one too. This was an unusual one for me. It's a beautiful photo, and I say you see it in color because you can imagine the yellow and the blues and the reflections here in the water. Practicing some visual vocabulary, just trying to continue to make myself do things so that I get more fluidity with some of the sketchnoting kinds of icons and images I might need. Lots of circle work. And I think this is before the 100-day project started, but I was sort of seeing how I felt. And this was my very first experiment with dip pen, very first one, and it has you can feel the scratching in it. I had a whole long experience with dip pen and circles. So I decided for the 100-day project to do dip pen and circles. And this says day 1. So this must have been it. I was going to say I didn't ultimately number them, although this one says day 3. Ultimately, I didn't number them because I used so many circles in my weeks that are not part of the 100 days. They weren't counting. So it was really 100 days. Every day I did something in a circle and I did something with dip pen. So all of these portraits are with dip pen. And I started out doing that with a lot of black. This kind of fill-in I do so much of now, and these kinds of pages are the ones that I most appreciate when I look back. And there is a lot here. Another one, the circle and the portrait, but I didn't ink that one. Circle, portrait, dip pen. I did label some of them, day 5. Go back and put my pages in later. And I set this one up to do a larger portrait and then just didn't do it. Day 8, large portrait here, but lots of smaller portraits too worked in. And I worked with dip pen for all of the portrait work. I really loved it. I used a Zebra G for the first almost 2 weeks maybe, and then decided I was committed enough to the 100-day project to go ahead, and I bought the Maru nib for myself, which is very, very, very fine, and it's like needle fine. And so there was a transition point where I started using a Maru and used it mostly. I was practicing just some body lines and shapes using some references online. I did a whole page of that. Again, if I could just get that to really stick in my head so that I could visualize people when I draw them, I'd be so happy if I could just have visualized this myself, but I can't. Portrait, self-portrait, some panel work, recording a moment that was poignant and memorable for me. And then lots and lots of circles. As this 100 days unfolded, circles just became the thing. So circles are everywhere. And I found that I loved working in circles. And I didn't expect that. So a trio of portraits, and I think these are all the same person. So this is a trio of different portraits of the same person. She had a series of photos, and I wanted to see what it would look like. And they all look super different to me. Lots of notes, numbers. This was a portrait of my son on a birthday. A toy. I really like doing things like this. Partly because I always think they end up fairly wonky, but there's something about it that I love. It charms me in some way. So a couple of circles here that didn't even get filled in this week. And sometimes that happens, and there are lots of notes. It was obviously a very text-heavy week. Lots of portraits, and you can see this smudging that I'm talking about that happens, and it happens more with certain inks. But some of this is black. You can tell whether it, even once it dries really nicely, sometimes you open it back up and find that you've gotten this kind of smudge and lift. So that's why I started keeping pages. Really, really love working with the circles this way. Lots of notes. What I love about the illustrated journal is that you might find so many different things: a serious portrait, a toy from your children's past, a figurine someone gave you, and a bottle of Lysol. Portrait that didn't get inked, and a self-portrait that did. And as you can see, the circle is here, and I went ahead and worked out of it. I found that I do that a lot. I did that a lot, and I do it a lot. I start with the circle. Sometimes I let it cut off, and sometimes I just go ahead and trail outside. I'm really flexible about that. I like both of these portraits together. I think I like them individually, but I think there's something about these that play well. They play nicely together. But again, the lots of little things are from the Illustrate Your Week prompts. So it helps give you things to think about and tuck in. Portrait of an author that I am reading now. I think the story of finding this author, was back here. And I'm still reading these books, and I am loving these books. I am obsessed with the series. And this birthday portrait of a friend, this is a ritual or tradition every year. Couple of big portraits, lots of big portraits in here, and another really big one, and I really enjoyed drawing her, and then I just never did go back and really ink it. And sometimes I do these drawings in my weekly drawing group on Zoom with some friends, and sometimes I just don't have the time or energy to fully go back. I love doing hair, and sometimes I look though at it and think, oh, it feels exhausting. So a whole bunch of portraits here. This is my brother on a birthday. This is me for my weekly self-portrait. And it's Annie Dillard. I think a writer was a prompt that, well, it must have been several writers because there's Sylvia Plath. Sometimes things stay in pencil. It's okay. It's a sketchbook. It's a journal. I think you have to get past the idea that things will all look completely finished or be somehow what everyone else expects them to be. I really enjoyed this portrait and the multicolored hair, self-portrait, lots of notes, things I want to watch or things that I'm going to watch or things that I have watched. May Sarton. Someone in the news. Someone on a TV show I was watching. So sometimes just by the little notes, I know these were Illustrate Your Week prompts. And then, you know, a lot of notes. This is someone at Sketchy, but it's someone who's super sweet and super supportive. And I was really happy to draw her. Really enjoyed doing that one. I think I did a time lapse of that. Annie Leibovitz. This is someone at Instagram who is super sweet and super talented, super supportive. And I don't even think she recognized herself when she saw it, but it is cropped into a circle, of course. Lots of circles. Lots and lots of circles, lots of different colors of ink. I was still using dip pen, but I was experimenting with dip pen in colored fountain pen inks. Some notes. I still love this color. It's still probably my favorite. It led me down a path of wanting a ton of magentas. And oddly, I don't have this magenta, just the sample, but I've tried a bunch of them trying to find something similar. This I keep in a pen. I keep this in this pen actually, but it was never quite what I wanted, but it's nice as a dark color, a darker burgundy color, darker magenta in my journal. I do like it. This is way too pink and super dry. This is my son, author. Notes. Portraits, lots of portraits. It's always interesting to look back at them weeks or months later. I like the color range on this page. Self-portrait, lots of filling of space, hair in the color, lots of doodling outside the space. Celebrations that I'm glad get noted. A mnemonic device. Adjectives for each day. Illustrate Your Week is always random, and yet I find that it's random enough that it makes it interesting even when things repeat. This is the kind of page I really like. It's very full. It uses the circles in all these ways, but it's filled in. It's nicely tucked in together. At the same time, I love this series of contours, a sign. Little things like this just make me happy. Flower. Filling in words with fountain pen is sometimes very slow. I have all basically fine and extra fine pens. This is something that did smear from something. And this was an unfortunate drop. I had very few drops with dip pen, but this is definitely a huge drop, a splatter. I picked it up to probably work on that. Numbers continued. Sometimes the portraits that I don't finish are portraits I actually really like. I just didn't ever get back to to finishing them. But again, it is a sketchbook, and I'm okay with that. This is just whatever happens, happens, whatever gets recorded. And I'm happy to see the sort of real self-portraits mixed in with all these other things each week. Some things whimsical, lots of things from sketchy. When I did this, I didn't think that this ink was so similar to this, but now that I have this one, because I was never able to get this one, I do. But the reality is, I like seeing them all together. I'm not a one ink person because I like to see, you know, sort of slight tonal differences on the page and how they work together. It just creates a really comforting feeling. It's not super boring. You know, these are similar. If they were all the same, it would just be completely monotone and it would feel different. Having these colors that are similar, even here, these different colors in here, this is my grandmother, similar colors that go together and are subtly different in some cases, I really love. And for some reason, I love mixing this soft mint in. It is the color that mixes in nicely. Not all the turquoises feel the same to me, but I really like using this one, and the other one that I said is a good alternative is the Urban, I think it's Vert Reseda. Yeah, Vert Reseda. I might say that, you might say that differently. I'm not sure. Reseda, I'm not sure. Flower, lots of portraits. Day 100. So this was the end of it. I had finished 100 days by this point. All in here. 100 days of circles and dip pins. Graphic novel. Here, I guess I was so glad to not need to do a circle that I was really like, okay, let's see what happens without a circle. Went right back to a circle. And then I was getting ready for, self-portrait didn't get inked. And then I was getting ready for iCAD and thinking about what I was going to do, really playing through some issues in my head. Anyone who saw my iCAD will see that I was sort of just giving myself a little bit of a test for some things that I wanted to do, and I did end up doing. I did sort my way out. I also knew that as iCAD approached, I would be working less and less in the illustrated journal, and so these pages start to wind down in this book. So once iCAD started, there was much less in the illustrated journal, and final self-portrait for the year, and lots of just notes while I was doing iCAD, and I tried a paper that didn't work, and so I put it in here just so I have it. I tried to continue my illustrated journal, but I was really caught up doing iCAD. So that's it. Another sketchbook, another journal, another span of weeks. So it went all the way through June, because this is week 3 for year 51, so that's July 10th, so the middle of July. But I got 6 months of the year in this one book, and I'm happy about that. To me, it's not about having 100 journals filled. Each of these pages contains a great deal. So even if it is 1 page or 2 pages a week, oh, I guess I should have said that. A lot of these, week 2, this is still week 2. A lot of these are 2 pages a week in this format. Week 3, and these were week 3. So I allowed myself, those are also week 3. So week 4, that's week 4, 5. So I think most weeks I probably had, excluding these separate pages. Sometimes I did that because I know they won't fit into my weekly spreads. So this was week 6. And these were also week 6, 7. So that's why sometimes when I said, oh, I think authors was a prompt, I would find a couple here and then a couple on the next page, because I had almost forgotten that, because in my new format, I can fit the entire week on 2 pages. But this was just a little smaller. So again, it makes me happy. And it was nice today to sit down and look through it. I was going to record a quick look at what I'm doing in the A3, which is considerably bigger. And I pulled this one out instead because I was thinking about Inktober and about circles versus squares. And I knew that this sketchbook holds the circles. And I just wanted to look through. And I was actually happy to see also how many squares are here. What I do for October looks very different than what I do in my illustrated journal, but I am thinking about circles and squares because I really enjoyed all of the circles. But I don't know that I'm going to enjoy circles in a grid in quite the same way, so we will see. Again, if you are interested in this kind of talk and this kind of creative talk, I hope you'll check out the Creativity Matters podcast. And if you're interested in illustrated journaling, trying it, working it into what you already do with your bullet journal, your art journal, your sketchbook, if you're interested in combining your words and your visuals all together, then you can find the prompts on the Creativity Matters podcast feed at Instagram, and I share my weekly work at OAmyOAmy. I hope to see you there. Thank you.